It's raining roses in Ann Arbor. Michigan does it. They beat Alabama in what was undeniably the most satisfying victory of my lifetime, at least for the Michigan Wolverines. I am your host, as always, Nathan, but today I'm simply a Michigan football fan. So, with the intro out of the way, I'd like to say hello and welcome to the JSA studio as we talk about Michigan beating Alabama and recapping the 2023 college football season. Now, I don't know if you watched my Michigan versus Alabama preview game where I spend 60 minutes talking about how I think Michigan is going to win the game, even though Alabama absolutely has a very, very good chance to win the game. At the end of that video, I predicted that Michigan would win 27-21. And given the final score, I'm going to count that as a victory. I will also say this pretty quickly. We're not going to talk about it, but my other video with Washington versus Texas, I predicted that game to be 31-34. So I'm going to also take that victory. Both of my videos on the semifinals read like prophecy now. If you go back and watch those videos, pretty much everything that I said, there's a few things here or there where I got wrong or missed the mark a little bit on, but the big, broad picture for both of those games, I hit the nail on the head. Almost like I know what I'm talking about. And we'll talk about my overall bowl record and some of my preseason predictions as well, where I was better than anybody who didn't know what they were talking about could reasonably hope to be. So I think I've kind of proven myself a little bit with my public opinions and talking about shit so far. Nevertheless, tangent aside, Michigan beat Alabama. If you had told me in 2020 or 2019, hell, even 11 games through 2021, that Michigan would beat Alabama in a playoff semifinal game, I would not believe you. Flat out and straight up. I would say you're clinically insane. Alabama's got first-round quarterbacks, first-round wide receivers for days. They're way more physical than Michigan, despite Michigan always talking about how they're a physical football team. Never made any sense to me. So the fact that that is the reality, that Michigan not only was just as physical as Alabama, but you could make the argument that they were more physical and more athletic even than this Alabama team was. And the fact that that is the reality of existence right now is absolutely absurd to me. I don't really know how to handle it. Like, I grew up in an era of not just Michigan football, but in the sports for any level of the state of Michigan, it was really just pain constantly. When I grew up, the Lions were horrible. And then they got Matthew Stafford and became slightly less horrible for a period of time. But that was just a different form of heartbreak because I got to watch them waste Matthew Stafford for 12 years and waste Calvin Johnson's entire career, which was horrible. But that wasn't it. The Tigers make two brilliant runs to the World Series only to get utterly destroyed and ran off the field in both of the actual World Series games. The Pistons completely fell apart, and I didn't get into hockey until like 2 years ago, so I don't have the Red Wings to lean back on because they won a title in '08 when I would have been 11. So that could have been my one thing, but I don't have that. And more so than that, when we look at the other sports at the University of Michigan with basketball, they kept making the national title game and losing. They did that twice in a 5-year stretch. Then if you look at Michigan hockey, potentially, they've made a couple of Frozen Fours recently, but they haven't really done anything. It's just heartbreak all around. I can keep going, but I don't need to. And this Michigan win has not sunk into me quite yet. I don't think I understand the gravity of this quite yet. Like, it hasn't hit me. It probably will sometime by the end of this week. Kind of like how it took this past week for me to understand what an accomplishment the Lions had done this year was. I think it might take me this week to really fully get Michigan and the great accomplishments that they have had this year. Michigan has won the Rose Bowl for the second time while I've been alive. However, the first time I was just barely over 2 months old, and my brain had not developed enough to be able to create memories. But I will carry these memories of this game with me until I die. Moving into the sort of micro of the game, the specific instances, I think one of the things that I said was true did come out to be true, which is J.J. McCarthy will make the one big mistake, and you just kind of have to hope that that was earlier on in the game than it is later on in the game. And it turns out it was the first play of the game, where he decided to throw the ball to Caleb Downs for no reason when he had Roman Wilson open underneath. And you can tell, if you go back and watch the opening series, which I recorded the game on my TV, so I can do that, you can tell this team was nervous the first quarter, or, well, more so like the first half of the first quarter. And it did kind of get to them. That JJ play was very bad. The Samaj Morgan muffed punt, which led to the Alabama touchdown, was also very bad. And Michigan just kind of didn't really have a great day on special teams in general. That's been beat to death. Everybody's talked about it. I don't particularly feel the need to go super in depth with it, but I think the Michigan defense did a great job. I think the Michigan offense, when it mattered, turned it on and won the game on back-to-back drives effectively. The one where they hit Roman Wilson for the touchdown, and then the two Blake Corum runs for 9, and then the rest of the yardage for the touchdown. That was special to see live. And when the Michigan defense stopped Milroe on that quarterback run, it was supposed to be a counter, but Mike Sandersill blitzing kind of forced Jalen Milroe's hand to hit it earlier than he should have, because you can see when he goes down on the ground, the lane is right there, and that's a touchdown. So if Mike Sandersill doesn't blitz, that's a touchdown, and the game goes to double overtime probably, and you never know what happens after that. But Jesse Minter had the perfect play call designed. He blitzed Mike Sandersill to force the issue on the play that everybody knew was coming, and Josiah Smith blew up future first-round pick J.C. Latham and made the play to win Michigan the Rose Bowl. And when that happened, I think I screamed probably the loudest that I've ever screamed in my entire life, just like 3 or 4 times. And I had to watch the game alone at a different part of the house, because both of my parents work on Saturdays usually, so I watch most Michigan games alone unless they're at night. And for Michigan, Ohio State, the past 3 years, I've been alone when I watched it because my grandmother passed away in 2020, so I didn't get to watch it with her. And every time that I've been alone watching the games, Michigan's basically won. Like I think me and my parents watched Michigan versus TCU together because that was the later game, which kicked at 8:30, I think. So I literally think in the past 3 years, the one time we've watched a Michigan football game together, Michigan played probably their worst game defensively ever, and also got beat by a vastly inferior team in TCU. And don't worry, by the way, I will be alone on Monday for the national championship game. I'm not about to jinx this team by watching it with my family. Sorry, Mom and Dad, I'm going to be alone. Either way, this was a spectacular win for Michigan, a program-defining moment, and regardless of what happens after this season with Jim Harbaugh or the NCAA investigations or whatever, this was special. Moving on to how I did in bowl games in general, not just the Rose Bowl. I went 22-13 on my 2 videos where I broke down the non-big bowl games, or at least the ones that could have or should have been interesting in my opinion. I went 4-0 in the games that I said should have mattered, and I went 2-1 in individual videos for an overall record of 27-14. And The receipts are still up. You can go back and watch those videos if you want to. The one individual video where I did kind of miss my mark was the Penn State and Ole Miss video. I didn't particularly understand how much of an impact Manny Diaz's loss for Penn State was going to be, because that was a completely different defense. Like, players weren't making plays that they had made all year in that game. And I think a lot of it probably had to do with preparation and the fact that they probably weren't prepped as well as they could have been, as Manny Diaz is one of the best defensive minds in all of college football. So beyond just my bowl game record, in my preseason videos where I was predicting like who's going to win the Big Ten and every Big Ten team's records, and I also made a video predicting the other conference champions that I took down because that was the one video that I genuinely was not proud of at the time. Well, looking back on it, like now I would do things differently for a lot of the stuff, and I've become a better and more comfortable communicator. But that video, even when I made it and was making it, I was like, yeah, no, I probably shouldn't put this up. And then I did, and then it did really poorly, so I took it down. But getting back to the task at hand, the reason I put Michigan on here is because I was right about them in the Rose Bowl, which we've already talked about. But again, I just want to reiterate, I really did a really good job about breaking that video down and explaining to you how Michigan was going to win the game, because that was basically how they won the game. The only thing that I kind of missed on was that I thought Michigan was going to have to get 2 turnovers, not 1. And they only got 1. And it didn't particularly matter. Both sides played a sloppy but somehow very clean game at the same time. I don't really think anybody can say that they got screwed by the refs or by a bad break here or there and that decided the game. Both sides made plays. Both sides made massive mistakes. And the fact of the matter is that Michigan won, I think, because they wanted it more than Alabama, and because they had a better matchup against Alabama than Alabama had against Michigan. As far as preseason stuff, I absolutely nailed Penn State and USC. I was talking about how USC was not going to be a good football team way before everybody else. And after they started 6-0, and I believe I predicted them to lose to USC, I then looked at the rest of their schedule and I said, there's a very, very real possibility they don't win another game. And if they do win another game, it's probably Cal. So best case scenario, they're going 7-5. And I believe it was after they beat Cal, I came out definitively and said that they would not win another game in the regular season. And that's exactly what happened. I had a great read on that USC team. And the read was, Caleb Williams is awesome. Everybody else sucks. And for Penn State, you can go back and watch my video. My big question marks were, can Drew Allar take that next step and be a guy that is actually going to be a quarterback? And I think he was largely held back by play calling this year, because when he was allowed to throw the ball deep and they did kind of open up the offense, he actually looked pretty solid. But in the big games, the 3 big games that he had this year against Michigan, Ohio State, and Ole Miss, they just actively refused to run an offensive scheme. So I don't know if a new offensive coordinator is going to change that or not, but I think there's a possibility that people are potentially undervaluing Drew Allar right now. I get it. He's probably not going to be good, and I don't think he's going to be the best quarterback in the Big Ten next year. So I don't know, but my preseason read for Penn State was exactly correct. I said 10-2, and we'll see who they get matched up against the bowl game. And I did get their bowl game wrong, which is a good transition to where I was wrong. And I do definitely want to talk about where I was wrong, because I don't feel like you should only ever talk about when you were right. And you should only ever push that stuff forward. I could name names of certain people that do that very effectively, that kind of makes you forget that they had some truly tremendously awful takes about certain things. Nevertheless, I'm not going to, but there are people like that, and I don't want to be like that. I will openly admit when I'm wrong, and I will talk about why I was wrong as well. And I was wrong not just about Ole Miss versus Penn State, but about the trajectory of the Ole Miss football program as well. My general feelings was that Ole Miss was going to be the sort of team that was always going to hang around 8 or 9 wins. Maybe you get lucky one year and get to 10 wins, and then that's the ceiling of your football program. The way that Lane Kiffin has attacked not just the transfer portal, where he's getting extraordinarily high quality players left and right, but also actually recruiting. Like, I think they have a top 10 high school recruiting class. I'm not positive, but he's recruiting very well as transfer portal recruiting. And he has elevated Ole Miss as a program to the level where I could legitimately see them sneaking into a SEC championship game. And if you can get to the championship game, you got a chance to win the championship game. So I do believe that I was wrong about Lane Kiffin and that football program, but specifically I was wrong about them versus Penn State. I did think Penn State would win a relatively close football game. Another spot where I was dead wrong was Northwestern. I believe I predicted them to go 2-10, and I was kind of indignant about it. I was kind of like, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this. Northwestern fans, you kind of know what this season is going to look like. So, yeah. But I was wrong about that as well. And not only that, but you're looking forward. This looks like a good program. This looks like a program that could potentially be consistently competing in bowl games, which is what you were under. I don't think you're ever going to compete for a Big Ten title ever again like you had under Pat, but that was a different system. Nevertheless, I do think you are headed in a good direction. And the last team that I was wrong about in terms of the opposite, where I thought they would be a lot better, was North Carolina. I thought their ceiling genuinely was 13-0 in the playoffs, and I thought their floor was 10-2. And they went 8-4. So I misread everything about that team except Drake May and the wide receiver room. I thought they'd be able to run the ball a little bit better. They ran the ball okay this year, but it was explosive, but it wasn't particularly consistent. Either way, this is a very good program going forward. Mac Brown is an outstanding football coach, and we don't know what the quarterback position is going to look like, but we've seen two quarterbacks under Mac Brown, and they've both been very, very good. So I think that is still a program that has a lot of upside and potential. When it comes to the preseason, I did in fact predict who was going to win the conference, and it didn't do as well as maybe it could have gone. And I predicted Florida State to win the ACC, so I was correct there. I predicted Ohio State to win the Big Ten, and they were very close. They lost to Michigan by 6 points, and they hypothetically had a chance to win there and then win the Big Ten championship. So that was close, but no. I had Texas winning the Big 12, but so did everybody else on the planet. And I had Oregon winning the Pac-12. I was certainly not alone in that assumption. They had a chance. It was a close game against Washington twice. Washington won. The worst one was me predicting LSU to win the SEC. They probably, best case scenario with the way that defense looked, was probably going to go 10-2, best case scenario. And they didn't even get to there, but LSU I am concerned about going forward because Jaden Daniels and how good he was masked a lot of problems on that team. Even the defense to an extent. Like, everybody knows that defense is very bad. I mean, they made Tanner Mordecai look like an actual NFL quarterback prospect. So, yeah, that's bad if you can do that. But that team, I think going forward, of the 5 or 6 SEC teams that really impressed this year, I think that's the one that I am the least confident in is actually going to be a consistent football program. Like, I think Missouri has a better chance to be a consistent program than LSU right now. I think Ole Miss has a better chance of being a consistent program and dethroning Alabama and Georgia than LSU does right now. And then Alabama and Georgia are still doing what they're doing. I think Billy Napier is a good coach who is going to get ran out of Florida before he has really had a chance to build anything. Billy Napier is going to need 5 years to get that program anywhere near being good. So I think that Florida is probably going to fire him before he gets the chance to actually do something. And I may get some flack for this still, but I like Tennessee and I like the direction that they're going. I think their kid, that 5-star QB that they brought in, Nico Lamalavea, I think is his name, or something akin to that. I really, really like him. He impressed me during their bowl game. And I think that is a program that has the potential to be able to put it all together and challenge the top dogs in the SEC. And outside of that, there's a couple of other places. Like I like South Carolina, but their best case scenario, they're going to go like 8-4. Outside of that, there's not a whole lot going on everywhere else, in my opinion, in the SEC. Oh, well, actually, Texas and Oklahoma are part of the SEC now, so I forgot about that. But Texas with Sark, I still like them very much. I like them a lot. And Oklahoma will never be relevant again. So we all have that to look forward to as well. Last thing I'm going to talk about is where this channel is going. We're going to shift modes here after the video on Friday, which will be about the national championship game. I'm going to be shifting my focus towards the NFL draft, which was my original view for this channel, was going to be talking about the draft and everything about that. And there's a couple other things in there. Like I did think I was going to make Michigan videos and all that. But this was mainly going to be a draft channel. And going forward, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to go back to posting like individual prospects before I start getting into groups and position groups and talking about those as well. Like I'll do a top 10 quarterbacks, I'll do a top 10 running backs, wide receivers, etc., etc. And going forward, that'll be what the plan is for this channel. So if you like draft content, please consider hitting the subscribe button. And it's at this point I'd like to ask you to like the video, subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and if you disagreed with me or you just have something to say, go ahead and drop a comment down in the comment section below. And now with the outro out of the way, there's only one thing left to say, and that's that I'll see you next time.